This is Carla Valiclan from the Secretariat of the Basel, Stockholm, and Rotterdam Convention. I'm here today with colleagues from the GFC Secretariat, and we have Rebecca and John. Both colleagues work in the GFC Secretariat, and they will be our presenters today. We asked them if they could help us do this information session for the BRS parties and regional centers of Basel and Rotterdam conventions, so that you have better chances to apply for the second round of applications with a deadline in about a month from today, the 15th of December. And they kindly agreed to offer some information today here and also answer your questions. So I would like to ask you all to use this opportunity to raise your questions and use this opportunity to clarify any points that you may have, either from the previous round of applications, because maybe some of you already have applied and either succeeded or not, or you are wondering why not, and so on. So use this opportunity to clarify any points that you have. They have simplified the process. They will explain that so that more chances are available for all of you. And in that sense, thank you very much, Rebecca and John, for taking the time. And thank you all participants for also taking the time today. I'll give now the floor to Rebecca, please. Rebecca, I'll stop sharing so that you can share your screen. Not sure if there's a problem for Rebecca to unmute herself. Rebecca, can you test? You can? Good. Thanks.
I can unmute myself. Now it works. And you can see my slides, right?
Yes.
Great. So hello and welcome from my side. As Carla already introduced, my name is Rebecca. I work for the Global Framework on Chemical Secretariat, and together with my colleague John, we both work on the fund, as well as a third colleague of ours called Eduardo, whose name you can also see on the slide, but we've split ourselves up a little bit from yesterday's webinar and today's webinar. But if you engage with the Global Framework on Chemicals Fund, you'll probably be working with one or more of the three of us. So as already mentioned by Carla, the purpose of today's session is to give you a quick overview of the Global Framework on Chemicals Fund, though we did do a launch webinar at the very beginning of the launch of the second round about 1.5 months ago. And if you would like more information, we would also recommend looking at the recordings of the launch webinar, as well as on the website, where we have very thorough information. Alongside that, we'll talk a bit more about the changes that we've made to round 2 and what it means to apply as a regional center or a BRS party. And we'll also talk a bit more about the round 1 projects, of which 2 are going to be implemented by a regional center. And we're very happy to have applicants from the first round who could share their experience with us. And then, as Carla mentioned, there's a lot of time for Q&A, so it's really an invitation for you to ask any questions, share any reflections, which we're also very excited to hear from you. So I'd just like to give you a quick recap of the Global Framework on Chemicals, which was adopted about 2 years ago in September 2023. It is the successor of the Strategic Approach to International Chemicals Management, SICHEM, and builds on those long-term successes. But it takes a bit of a different approach, looking at the life cycle of chemicals, strengthening the multi-stakeholder and multi-sectoral approach, and it also has a measurability structure. And as part of this framework, the conference where the framework was adopted also put in place the Global Framework on Chemicals Fund, that has the purpose of supporting countries in implementing the framework. As was already mentioned, we're currently in the second round of applications. The first round took place around a year ago, and we have made a couple of adjustments to this round. So we launched at the end of September, but instead of a one-step application process, which we had in the first round. We now have implemented a two-stage application process, which means that there is a concept stage, which is currently open until the 15th of December. And then the executive board that takes the decisions on the fund will review those concept notes and shortlist the most promising ones and ask them to submit a full application package in Q2 of next year. And I'll go into more details on that process in this presentation as well. The executive board has specified 3 strategic priorities related to the fund. The first of which is strengthening institutional capacities for the safe management of chemicals and waste. The second is looking at the high impact sectors, so those sectors that produce and use the chemicals, but also looking at mechanisms for financing the shift towards safe and sustainable alternatives, and also looking at opportunities of how this fund can provide the baseline and create an environment for further changes to happen, acknowledging that the available funds cannot change a whole system, but their intention is to shift the needle and to provide the baseline and the stepping stones for other sources of funding. And finally, as the whole framework, the fund also emphasizes regional cooperation, multi-sectoral engagement, as well as scalable solutions. So looking at how can countries work together, how can regional approaches be used, or how can one country pilot something with the intention of sharing their experience with other countries and finding solutions that are scalable. I've already mentioned to you the executive board, which is the decision-making board of the fund. The executive board is composed of representatives from the different UN regions, as well as the donors and contributors, which have gratefully made contributions to the fund. And you can see their country slides on this slide. And they meet on a regular basis to make decisions on all operations of the fund, as well as the applications. And John and I were there in March and June last year, where they were very engaged in reviewing all of the applications from the first round and properly assessing the applications that were received. And we as a secretariat basically provide the administrative support to the fund, and we also work with the successful applicants in putting together the proper contractual arrangements and then managing the projects from the UNEP side. There are 2 types of applicants that are eligible for this fund. First of all, it's governments that can apply for funding, as well as civil society networks, which can, according to the terms of reference, apply on an exceptional basis. Though we did have a lot of applications from civil society in the first round, and these were considered by the board, and 2 of the approved projects from the first round are going to be implemented by civil society. The funding ranges that are available are for projects between 300,000 and 800,000 US dollars. This is for the complete project. So even if your project involves more than one country, the total amount of the whole project cannot exceed 800,000 US dollars. And your project can have a project duration of up to 36 months, which is 3 years. But we have been encouraging all applicants to consider what fits best to their project. So really look at what is an appropriate time frame and what is an appropriate request for funding that is suitable for our project, and not necessarily to only aim for the maximum. Finally, one important requirement is also the 25% co-financing requirement, which means that all projects also have to show that they are bringing in-kind contributions or financial means with a total amount of 25% to the project. At the concept note, you can provide an indicative amount, but at the application stage, you will be asked to provide justification or proof of this, and you will also be requested to report on this. So as I've mentioned already, we're in a two-stage process, and we've really tried to slim this down from having applicants put together a huge amount of documents, but also for us and for the board to review all of these documents. So in the first stage, you only need to submit your concept note with two signatures, one from the lead applicant and one from a designated focal point, so a representative from a ministry or from the government. Um, these are to be submitted to us as a secretariat by the 15th of December. And as I mentioned before, the executive board will review these at its meeting in March. And then those which are shortlisted by the board will be asked to go on to the second stage, which you can see on the right of this slide, which then requires a signature by the official national focal point, as well as supporting documents from the different project partners, proof of co-finance, and other documents depending on what type of applicant you are. So finally, this slide basically provides you with QR codes and links to places on the website where you can find more information. So this basically is where you can find detailed information about the whole application cycle. There's a guidance document outlining all of the strategic priorities, the minimum criteria, as well as prioritization criteria and things that will not be funded. There's also a detailed application guideline that helps you understand what to put in each section of the concept note. And as I mentioned before, we've recorded and uploaded the slides of the launch webinar with even more details. Now I know that some of you've applied in the first round. The only thing that's really important is that we've changed all of the documents from the first round. So we kindly ask you not to reuse any documents that you submitted in the first round as the whole process has changed. And with that, I'll hand it over to John for the second part of the presentation.
I think John is muted, Artem.
Great. Thank you very much. Excellent. So yeah, for the second part of the presentation, we really wanted to focus on some recommendations that are particularly suitable to all of you joining us today. It was great that Carla reached out to us because in the first round last year, we had 4 project applications that were approved by the board. And 2 of those are actually being delivered by BCRCs, by regional centers. And so clearly there seemed to be something about regional centers that the board particularly liked in round 1. And so we did some thinking for you all and identified 3 different areas that we feel the regional centers brought to the table in round 1. And although it's certainly no guarantee that the board will continue to favor regional centers in the next round, that will be up to them. We do think that these 3 have lasting value that will continue to make regional centers an interesting partner for future project applications. So the first is the ability to secure strong government buy-in. And in both cases, it was member countries who submitted the applications. So the applicant was the government or a government on behalf, in this case, of a team of governments. And the implementing mechanism was the regional center. So that was an interesting mix. There was the applicant coming from the government, but the implementing partner was known and has a successful track record of implementing UN UNEP projects. And then the third aspect was a proven ability to manage multi-country and regional projects, which, of course, as regional centers is part of your forte. So these 3 aspects certainly brought value in the first round, and we believe they'll continue to be attractive in future rounds. I will end this slide with the note that, again, it is, of course, up to the executive board to make the final decisions. It is not up to the secretariat. And their preferences may change based on previous selections and on other criteria like regional diversity. Next slide, please. Okay. When you get into the application guidance and guidelines, you'll find that we review many criteria. In fact, it can be a staggering number of criteria. And so we wanted to come to you not with a lot of them, but rather 6 criteria that we felt, kind of a short list of criteria that we feel are very important in the selection and prioritization of applications, regardless of region or applicant. So and you'll see that 3 out of these 6 are in fact something that regional centers bring to the table. So the first, and this is one of the regional center strengths, is showing strong national ownership. What we're looking for here is that there's clear evidence, and usually multiple pieces of evidence, that the governments, that the countries that are being targeted in the application, their governments are strongly involved in one way or another. So certainly it helps if the government is applying. It helps when you have a strong support, indication of support, whether it's the support letter or the signature, and probably an explanation of where the relationship comes from that led to the signature of the support letter from a national government focal point, either the official GFC focal point or a designated focal point from another ministry. Of course, in your implementation arrangements, it's also important to show where the government fits into the project. Are they delivering a certain piece of it? Are they responsible for being integrated into the production of the outputs and the deliverables in your project? All of those are things that we look at to determine how well the national governments are integrated. And this is important for the criteria right to the right. This is long-term sustainability and a clear exit strategy. So what we're looking for sustainability is the board sees the GFC project funds as an investment. And as a result, there should be a return on investment, meaning that, yes, we have project activities for up to 3 years, but what we're really investing in is something that goes beyond 3 years. It creates a longer-term impact. And that's what we'd really like to see in these project proposals, is a clear path from what you plan to do to what that investment will bring, not only during the 3 years of where you're funded by the project, but even afterwards. And a clear point of that, of course, is what is your strategy from getting from the funded part, the 3 years of funding, to the sustainability part, where other stakeholders take forward the good work that you have done. The next criterion is probably going to seem self-explanatory: a clear and well-defined project description. That's a very sort of easy one, I guess, to select, but it's very important. Many projects come to us and it's not clear how the activities will produce what as deliverables or what as outputs. It's not quite clear how the outputs will really lead to the results or the outcome that you're striving to achieve. If those things aren't clearly attached to each other and sort of logically connected, it's very difficult for the board or the secretariat to understand the project, what it is you're going to achieve, and therefore we lose confidence that it's going to work. So spend time on making sure that it's a very concise, very convincing, and very logical project description. The next criterion is demonstrating value from money. Again, this seems a bit like an administrative thing, and partly it is. Having a good, logical, clear budget in your project application, or even in your concept note. We don't require a full budget at the concept note stage, but we do ask for indicative amounts of spending and budget. The board wants to see economical projects. So They did spend some time in round one making sure that that it was just good value for money, that the expenditures seem to fit the activities. If it appears that a relatively uncomplicated activity has a very large budget, that's going to raise question marks. So do your best to make the budget economical. And a clear tip on this one too is don't immediately assume that you need to go for the maximum budget of 800K. You may be able to have much more success and stand out more if you have a lower budget, maybe promise a little bit more, a little bit less rather, and then you're able to secure what you need for the project that you really want to run. I would discourage you from moving from a $500,000 project to an $800,000 project and then trying to fill in the blanks. Those things often stand out, but not in the best way. The other part of this criterion is the high co-financing. So as Rebecca mentioned, there's a minimum required 25% co-financing. However, the board looks appreciably, at least certainly did so in the first round of applications, on projects that go above and beyond that minimum and show that they're also really investing in the project, that they believe in it, and that this is sort of co-funded by GFC. The more that you can show that convincingly, the more you're going to stand out. Next is a proven implementation team. Incredibly important to build confidence, trust among the board that your team not only has a great idea, but is really capable of pulling it off. And so put some thought into your implementation team. Be clear about roles and responsibilities and why the different teams or different stakeholders are taking them up. The more that you can offer that they are truly bought into the project and working together, that will certainly help you move forward. Similar to this is building on previous or complementary initiatives. It's perfectly fine to have worked on a similar project in the past that this one extends or builds on. If you have run a project, it was successful, and there were clear sort of notes at the end of the project about, okay, we succeeded in doing A, but really what needs to be done next is B and C. It's great to see that in a project application. We want to know that you've justified why this project needs to be done and identified a clear gap. Finally, on the last criterion, regional and transboundary relevance. It's all four. It's not a rule, so I won't overly emphasize it. But all four of the successful projects in round one were regional. Okay. Now, I note this with caution because the first round was a pilot test, and we, in a way, as the first selection, a lot of things are getting ironed out. We've completely changed the application process. There's many lessons learned. Certainly, it's nice to show that you have an ability to deliver regionally. However, I don't want you to take this criterion as a discouragement that member states themselves can't put forward a one country proposal. I cannot speak for what the board will do in round two, but national applications are certainly relevant. And what will matter most are these other aspects here, that you show a clear path to impact, you have a great team, and you demonstrate value for money. And the governments you're working with are really bought into the project. Those will matter much more, I would say, than, again, I don't want to speak for the board. Those will matter certainly as much as whether or not it's a regional project. Next slide, please. Okay, we thought it would be helpful for you also to include some of the things that we've added since the first round of applications that are sort of no-goes. If this is what your project is about, it's not likely to succeed. So the first one is duplication. As I mentioned in the last slide, it's good to build on previous projects as long as it's identified a clear gap and that's what you're coming to GFC for. However, if it appears that you're duplicating another project, and some may do this in very good faith, you know, sometimes you want to build a bigger war chest to create more impact. But if it looks very duplicative, it's difficult for the team here to know why it's coming in as a duplication, why there are very similar or identical activities to another project we're aware of or one that you've done in the past. So I would avoid that impression as much as you can, and look for the unique value added of your project. The next exclusion criterion is focusing only on research. So the GFC board has made it clear that they will not fund projects that are purely research. So while academic institutions, like other civil society organizations and NGOs, are exceptionally eligible to apply, it does not mean that we want to see university applications or that focus purely on research, or other research centers focusing purely on baseline studies and technical assessments. What needs to be shown is a clear path to implementation and a measurable impact. We want to see that sustainability criterion fulfilled, but fulfilled through action, not simply what we learned from our research during a project. We would suggest finding another fund for purely research-focused projects. The next exclusion criterion is involving direct investment in commercial ventures or for-profit enterprises. This is a UN rule. We simply cannot fund these kinds of projects. So again, if this is the core of your project, I would encourage you to find a more suitable fund. Next exclusion criteria, is the project primarily focused on purchasing infrastructure or technical equipment? We have a 10% budget limit on equipment in these projects. Anything beyond that will not be acceptable by the board. So clearly the project cannot focus on infrastructure or technical equipment alone. And again, that's a maximum. So the focus should really be more on implementation through capacity building, institution building, these kinds of things rather than physical items. Final exclusion criterion, an overly narrow scope or a very limited impact. So we did receive in the first round several applications that were extremely narrow. For example, they only focused on a municipal area and had no clear plan to national mainstreaming or let alone regional mainstreaming, and no evidence that there would be national government uptake in any way. That was not of interest to the board in the first round, and so they've made that explicit this round that it's an exclusion criterion if the scope is overly narrow or the impact is severely limited. Okay, next slide, please. And this is my final slide. These are the 4 projects that were selected in the first round. The 2 on the left, you will see, are both being delivered by regional centers, and they are very interesting. We're going to also be focusing on 2 projects in Africa. The 2 on the left are delivered by regional centers. The 2 on the right are delivered by NGOs. And so this was our selection in the first round. Again, I think it was a more limited selection because it was the pilot round, and we'll see what happens for round 2. With that, I am very happy to hear that we have with us from one of the regional centers in Panama, Professor Annabelle Tatis, and she has joined us today. We're very fortunate to have her because she can talk about one of these successful projects. Professor Tatis, may I turn it over to you if you'd like to share some experiences, impressions?
Yes. Thank you, John. Thank you, John. Good morning, everybody. My name is Annabelle Tatis, and I work for the Stockholm and Basel Convention Regional Centers located in Panama at the University of Panama. I'm really pleased today to share with you guys our experience in a new implementing partner under the Global Framework of Chemical Funding Program. Our regional center is currently working alongside UNITAR, El Salvador, and Honduras on a GFC approved proposal to implement the globally harmonized system in El Salvador and Honduras. Our journey has been really positive and enriching. However, we encounter challenges, particularly in the log frame and budget final adjustments. However, to address this, we have maintained close coordination with all partners, including GFC, UNITAR, and the countries, to complete the process efficiently as soon as possible. We understand this is really a learning curve, as this is the first round of projects funding under the GFC, and the framework itself is evolving through this initial experience. That says that the process has required an additional effort of all technical teams, both at the country level and within our center. Encouragingly, we have seen an admirable level of commitment from all parties. Communication has remained respectful and constructive, and timelines has been adjusted with flexibility. Everyone has shown a strong willingness to go the extra mile. With the conclusion of this final stage, we expect to begin the implementation in early 2026 in both countries. From our experience, I would like to share a few recommendations for other regional centers and the countries and the parties. First of all, political and social dynamics always matter, and it's crucial for us as a centers to actively support countries throughout this process, this internal process, with consistent and assertive engagement to ensure they don't miss out on these valuable funding opportunities. Second, I will say that to know the tools is very important. All stakeholders should deeply understand the GFC planning instruments. And with that, I mean the log frame and the budget instrument. This helps accelerate responses to request changes, and more importantly, sustain engagement throughout the entire approval process. I would say that we remain committed to this to the success of the initiative, of this new initiative for us, and look forward to continuing collaboration across our region, which covers Central America and Mexico. Thank you.
Thank you, Annabelle. Thank you, John and Rebecca. Before we start the questions and answer session, or part of this session today, I don't know if Rebecca or John, do you have anything else to add, or for now we should listen to the participants?
I just wanted to say thank you to Annabelle Tatis for her intervention. I think that was very, very valuable. And yes, I can agree with that. I know it's been quite a learning journey, and it is the first round. So I much appreciate all of the engagement you've shown. And I can say that all of the 4 projects from the first round have been working very hard, but we also know that it's the first round in many, many different areas of learning, both as a secretariat as well as the project partners. And as we've noted, we've already changed the process based on a lot of those learnings. And we're very excited that those projects will start next year, actually putting ideas into practice and progressing on the framework. So thank you very much.
All right. Let's move on then now to the questions and answers session. Colleagues, all participants now, if you wish to ask for the floor, you have two opportunities to do that. Either you use the chat or you raise your hand. So please feel free to ask questions that you have. Let's see, it seems that someone, oh no, it's just thank you. Are we shy today? Someone is asking for the floor. What is this? No. If someone is not managing to find the chat button or raise your hand, you can also unmute yourself and make a question. Perhaps that's easier. No, it's Alessandro.
Yeah,
Alessandro, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, and thank you for this interesting webinar. My name is Alessandro.
Could you please identify yourself?
Yeah, my name is Alessandro Miraya from the SCRC Spain. Medway is the UNEMAP Regional Activity Center for SCP, Stockholm Convention Regional Center for Capacity Building and the Transfer of Technology Spain. It's a very long title, and my position is team leader, networking partnership and communication facility here at Medways. My question is, it is not really clear from the application guidelines when I understand submitting a project as SCRC, what should be or how should we identify ourselves in the application form? Are we considered as a governmental or government affiliated organization, which I understand not, or we identify ourselves as CRC, and then of course, I mean, in the consent note, we look for the endorsement of the focal point. Can you please explain that? Thank you.
So it's really a decision depending on where your regional center is and what the structure of the regional center is. So for the two regional centers from the first round, they're both hosted by a national university, which is close to the government or is part of the government. So they're both basically listed as government, but this is quite independent of your situation, which makes it a bit difficult to respond to this question. You can choose government, civil society network, or other. If you're not sure, you can also select other, and this won't really change the consideration by the board, but we know that there are a couple of organizations where it's not as clear. This is not only for some of the regional centers, but also for some other regional commissions, for example, and so on. So that is something the board will then look at, but they have emphasized that implementing through established structures such as regional centers is something they look into. So I would just recommend selecting one of those. Yeah.
If I could jump in as well, just to add a note, both of the successful projects of the first round had the governments as the applicants. So there, of course, it's clearly a government entity. The regional center was part of the application, but not as the submitter, so they don't need to select that. They were put in as the implementing center. So the applicant was the government, and then the implementing agency was the regional center. And that's a great way to do it. We would encourage you to try to do that. Again, the advantage of that is it shows it's another piece of evidence that the governments you're working with, government or governments, are bought into the project.
Thank you. There is another question now in the chat asking whether the regional center, whether the country where the regional center is located has to be one of the participating countries. And the second part of the question is if it's necessary for all participating countries to have an endorsement letter from each of them. If one of you could answer that. And then after that, there is a gentleman with the hands raised. So Peter, after colleagues from the GFC answered the first questions, then Peter, maybe you could speak
Okay,
up.
I can jump in on this one as well. No, the country where the regional center is located does not have to be one of the participating countries. And in fact, in both of the applications that were successful in round one, this was not the case. That's the regional center in Uruguay as well as the regional center in Panama. And neither Uruguay or Panama are among the countries. So that's not necessary. Um, and then, is it necessary for all participating countries to provide endorsement letters in the first stage? No, we're not requiring support letters in the first stage of the application process anymore. So we do require a signature from a designated focal point, and that will be important, but nothing further than that. So no letters.
Thank you. And now, Peter Azewe, if you can, please unmute yourself.
Hello everyone. My name is Peter Soy from Kenya. So I have 4 questions. I don't know whether I just ask them and then you can answer them.
Maybe one by one.
Yeah. So the first one is that you mentioned that that a successful candidate is one who has maybe some track record of having implemented something, but I don't see that provision to prove that in the concept note stage. So I don't know how you can ascertain that, because maybe if we don't mention it, does that make you a less applicant? That is my first question. So I jump into the second question.
Go one by one, Peter. I think it's
Should
better.
we can respond, I think. So there is a section in the application that, for example, asks, do you have, or what other projects have you implemented? That is one indication. Of course, it's not a must, but of course, it is also relevant to understand what other projects have you implemented. There's also a big section in general on the project implementation arrangements, which is also always a very important indication, because this is a section where you're supposed to describe how your project will be set up. And basically, though it's not a question like, do you have a track record of project implementation, these things, alongside with things as how the project is structured, give a good indication of the experience that a project team has. Now, we acknowledge that not every country and not every unit of a ministry or a regional center has a huge track record. We're not asking for that, but we're really looking at what is the capacity, what is the structure, what does the concept note indicate at this level. So it's not like a direct yes or no question, but more looking at the overall structure of the concept note, as well as the implementation arrangements and previous experience, I would say. But John, feel free to come in.
I would just say that none of the criteria alone are determinative. Okay. Yes, it's a strength if you can show great implementation experience. But if you have a great project, a reasonable budget, an incredible plan for sustaining it, I think the board would be willing to consider to take the risk in making an investment.
Thank you. So my second question is that in case it's one applicant organization that has 2 great ideas, are you limited to one? I'm just throwing in that.
No, you're not limited to one. So basically, every organization in every country can submit more than one application, but we do emphasize that the board looks at each application separately. So essentially, you're more or less competing with your own other application. And of course, the executive board also emphasizes the multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder nature of the framework, thus indicating that it would be nice for ideas to be coordinated and to put together in a concept note. That said, it's not always possible, of course. So if you have 2 great ideas, it's either for you to decide which one is the main priority, which one maybe fulfills more of the criteria. Of course, you can submit both, but I would recommend look at that to avoid that you're competing basically with yourself.
Thank you. My next question is, so in case it's a project is benefiting maybe, let's say, 3 countries, and I submit my concept note and with the signature from a focal point from my country. Now, country B, is the signature from the implementing entity needed, or will the focal point of country B also need to sign anything at this stage? Because like, let's say it's Kenya, and then maybe I want to collaborate with, let's say a country like maybe Uganda. Will Uganda focal point need to be to sign at this concept note stage?
So for that, basically the form says that it would be good to, or that it's important to show the national support, which is done through the signature of a focal point or a designated focal point from the involved countries. So what we've told applicants is to use the last page of the concept note and basically provide a copy with the signature of a designated focal point from each of the participating countries. Now, this doesn't have to be the national focal point at the application, at the concept note stage, which means that if, for example, you're working on a project that is more focused on health aspects, this could also be a senior representative from a Ministry of Health from the countries involved. But bear in mind that at the application stage, so if your concept note gets shortlisted, you will need to provide an official endorsement letter as well as the signature by the national focal point of these countries. So it's good to engage early with the respective national focal points.
I was worried by that at the application stage. I think I only see it only comes out clear that the applicant's focal point is the most essential. The others you can mention, and if your concept note passes, maybe that's when you now start when looking for the others. I don't know.
Well, at the end of the day, so basically for the concept note, you already are supposed to show that the countries involved have a certain ownership and that they want the project. So it's important to provide at least the endorsement of a focal point from each involved government. But of course, then at the application stage, this will be looked at even closer to really ensure that that the application is backed.
That was clear. The last question is more of, in case round one, one of the beneficiary was from your country, does that make you less competitive for the sake of regional, spread outs?
So, do you want to answer, John, or should I answer? Okay, I can answer. So basically, the terms of reference of the fund do specify that the board also looks at the regional balance between the different regions, as well as taking into consideration the specific needs of least developed countries and SIDS. And as you've seen, the 4 applications from the first round, there were 2 in Africa and 2 in the Latin American region. So the board will, of course, take this into consideration in the second round. That said, the UN regions are, of course, not of the same size. They also have different challenges, and the diversity of concept notes or of applications we received in the first round makes it challenging in itself to only consider the regional balance, because there are these other criteria which John has elaborated on. So I think it's something, or we know that it's something the board takes into consideration, but I would say it shouldn't discourage anyone from applying with a good project idea, especially with different regional possibilities. For example, I think this is something completely different than national projects, where there's also this understanding that if one country already has one project on chemicals, why should they now have one other national project on exactly the same topical area? Whereas in regional projects, of course, the topics can be completely different. The regional scope can be completely different. So I would say, yes, the board will definitely take this into consideration alongside with the other criteria. So at the end of the day, it's about convincing the board that your concept note makes sense for your country or region.
Thank you for your responses.
Thank you, Peter. I think your questions probably are questions from many participants, so the answers should help more colleagues here on the call. We have another question on the chat, which is about the development of a regulation and whether this qualifies as an eligible project for the fund.
So the short answer is yes, it does. I would simply encourage you to be convincing that in the country context, why the regulation hasn't been taken yet, what the, why is it needed, being clear about the rationale behind why this is urgent, why it's not being funded already. Think through these kinds of questions and why the fund should be getting engaged. And then just follow the other criteria. How are you going to get there? What are the activities? Who are your stakeholders? How do you interact with them in your implementation team? Those are the things we'll be looking at. But in short, yes, absolutely.
Thank you, John. Colleagues, we have another 4 minutes. If there is any question, yeah, we have some questions again on the chat. Diana, would you like to say something? Perhaps you could unmute yourself and ask, or if not, no? Okay, so the questions are, is it possible to apply having a project regarding these matters? No, so it's about the scope of the GFC. So the first one,
Now
Diana?
it's working.
Good.
Yeah, now it's working because I tried to unmute myself, but it didn't work. But yeah, I would like to, well, I'm sorry, I'm Diana Monroy from the Environmental Matters in the Foreign Affairs Ministry. And well, I have this topic with the Minamata Convention. I know that we cannot present a project that coincide, which objectives coincide with the ones in the specific international program. And I know that that one is related to capacity building, and but I don't know if the topics or the matters I just put on the chat are it is possible because the Minamata Convention doesn't have any point regarding these two topics about monitoring and the remediation projects. So I would like to know if those topics are inside or are within the scope of the GFC.
So this is a bit of a challenging question. We have similar questions related to POPs under the Stockholm Convention, because of course, yeah, all these funding mechanisms have certain focus areas and some of the areas are a bit blurry between them. Now, as John already emphasized, the idea of the fund is not to duplicate anything that's already potentially being funded or that could be funded. But also creating an enabling environment. So I think for projects related specifically to Mercury or POPs, what would be really important is to emphasize why this should be funded under the GFC fund. So the points you just made to say this is not something the Jeff has a focus on and aspects like that can be convincing to the board. I think another option is maybe using an approach that is not necessarily focused on one chemical, but maybe includes more chemicals and puts the subject matter into focus, which we also had in the first round, where we had some applications that had POPs and other hazardous chemicals, for example, which already broadens the scope. I mean, at the end of the day, it's for the executive board to decide, and they, as John already said, look at projects that make a difference, that are not funded or fundable by anyone else, and they also look at the other criteria to understand, is the project going to make a difference in those countries? So I think things like the project you just said, it's about making a strong case for why the GFC fund should fund this, and it's even more relevant for the chemicals covered under the conventions.
Well, I was saying that because the Minamata Convention doesn't have any cover for these kind of projects. I mean, there is it is focused on the scope of the capacity building techniques and assistance. So, for example, we have this this problem, at least in Colombia, about the contamination from mercury in body of and bodies of water, and also the mercury exposure in indigenous population. So that's why, and also, and because I have this, there is a synergy between GEF, between the GEF and the with the Kunming-Montreal framework. So those, I mean, in this synergy, there is some points regarding monitoring, the mercury monitoring exercises, but not the remediation, for example. So that's why I was curious about the possibilities for to apply in these topics in here. I mean, with this fund. That was my question in general.
Thank you very much. We reached the end of the session today. We have here on the chat, if everybody could check, John and I put some information for everyone here. In case you have questions to the Secretariat, there is an email you can use, and also the website with information about the fund and how to apply for them, and also the tools and resources that have been developed by the Secretariat. There are many documents to help you with your process, so I invite you all to have a look. And if you have any questions, to reach out to the colleagues. The sooner the better, if I recall correctly from the session yesterday, because the deadline is in a month from now. So I think the Secretariat can help you if you reach out to them with some questions in the next couple of days only. After that, it will be difficult for them to answer questions, basic questions that you may have. So that's why we decided to organize these sessions. So I would like to thank you very much, Rebecca and John, first, for their time and taking the time to talk to us today to answer these questions, and for all the participants, and also Annabelle for explaining from her perspective. So we appreciate very much the attention and time that everybody put here, and good luck. Hope several of you can apply for this opportunity and hopefully also are successful. Have a good weekend. Thank you.
And thank you
Thank you
to
very
Carla and
much.
everyone for joining.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.